explain to me when a investigator from the state troopers would become involved in a case as opposed to an investigator in a municipal case?
Well, for Alaska, there are no counties in Alaska. So it's the municipalities and it's the state troopers. And so anything that happens within a municipality that has a law enforcement agency, they investigate that crime. Anything outside of the municipality, which is a huge area in Alaska, is investigated by the Alaska State Troopers.
So there's no counties in Alaska, but it is subdivided up into municipalities.
Municipalities and boroughs, but there's no borough. There's borough governments, but nothing law enforcement side. That's strictly the state troopers who do that. So there are no county sheriffs. There's just the municipal in law enforcement for the state is the municipalities and the state troopers, and that's it. Spread pretty thin.
You were talking to me about something earlier today, and well, just real briefly about marrying this couple with your badge and why you thought that would work, and I mean, were they drunk at the time, or what I mean, why did they think that was good? Why did they
Well, because they're drunk, they're alcoholics, and
first of all, give a little background of the story so we can start.
oh, okay. I thought did we do that right? I guess we
We talked about it a little bit, but I want you to go into a little bit more about it.
Yeah, well, there was this couple that was lived in the Paxton area where I was stationed during the pipeline days, and they were always squabbling back and forth. And I was getting calls up there. One or the other one would call on a CB, and then I'd have to go up there and take care of that. Well, it was getting busier and busier because of pipeline construction, and I just didn't have the time. And on the way up there, I'm saying, I've got to end this somehow. Something's got to stop because I can't keep going up there all the time. So I got there and I listened to their stories, basically the same story yet again. He doesn't like me, I don't like him, blah, blah, blah. So I just said, okay, you two can't live together anymore. So I pulled this right out of the sky, and I had them put their hands on my badge, and I officially divorced them. And they were a divorced couple. And I told him that now there's a divorce, you can't live with her anymore. And so let's take you down to the lodge. And so we drove him down to the lodge, and he spent the night there. And then the next day he was on my door knocking, and I got up and went and saw him, and he was in tears and said he didn't want to be divorced from his wife. He really believed that he was divorced. And he loved her so very much, and he's really learned some lessons this time around. So I said, all right, get in the car. So I drove back up and made them put their hands on my badge again, and I married him. And they've been living happily ever after. I never got another call up there. So that was a long time ago.
Tell me the story about Anne.
Or Amy Sue Patrick. Amy Sue Patrick was a little 18-year-old girl, just graduated from high school in Wasilla, Alaska. She was house sitting a house in the Big Lake area, which is just north of Wasilla. And the last anybody had heard her, she was talking on the phone to her boyfriend, and someone was knocking on the door, and she says, "I'll be right back." And no one ever came back again. And so we got into the it started off as a missing person, and then eventually, as we got into it, we believed that she was murdered. And the suspect was a Korean man who was at the house the day before with the owner's son of the house that she was house sitting for. So he had come back and we believe had ether with him. He was a chemist and he had access to all kinds of stuff, and managed to render her unconscious and then kidnapped her. And after he got into the Anchorage area, he murdered her and then came back and put her body in 2 garbage bags and then dumped her at the Anchorage landfill. I was part of that investigative team, and I was pretty well had been gotten very close to the family, mother and father. And as we went through the investigation to this Korean man, it appeared as though after he murdered her, he dumped her in the landfill, but we didn't have a body yet, so a decision had to be made to go retrieve the body. And I had decided that I would do this. Mr. Patrick, Dale Patrick, came to me and made me promise him I'd get his daughter out of the landfill. And I gave him my word that I would. Those who know me know I keep my word. And so, having no idea what I was getting into until I drove up to the landfill and realized how huge this place was, I began to doubt my abilities to keep my word because I didn't know how we were going to do this. But managed to get refocused and come up with an intuitive way to figure out to get a manageable search area of the landfill, which ended up being about football size. And football field size. And we were at that dump for 30 days. We lived at that dump. I came there at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. I would get up at 4, drive the dump, live in the dump till 5 or 6 o'clock at night, digging the dump up and looking for Amy's body. And costing a lot of money. And the colonel at the time was getting to the point where we had to call it. We were getting a lot of negative press from the newspaper because they had their own ideas on how this whole thing happened, and I don't believe that they thought we knew what we were doing, and we were getting to the end of this area that we were searching. I'm still believing that Amy's still in the dump, and I'm believing we're going to be really close, so on. When there was a time that we were talking about shutting the search down, I went to a good friend of mine that we grew up in the troopers together, and he's now my boss. And I asked him to, even though the colonel wanted me to stop, and understanding his position, there was a lot of money being spent and we weren't getting anywhere. I all but begged Lieutenant Glass to give me 2 more days at this and I'll have her. Because I believed in my heart we were that close. And I didn't tell anybody this, and I guess that the statute of limitations have gone beyond that, but I'd actually made arrangements to have the backhoe operator stay at his own time, buy his own fuel for his deal, and then we were going to come in our own time and not tell anybody we were there, and continue to looking for whether or not we were told to stop or not. And so we went there, and we were up at one of the local restaurants there, and I told everybody, the 3 people we had left in the crew, that we're going to find her today. This is the day we're going to find her. You have to believe in me, and we have to keep this. And so we went out, and 1 hour later we had her. And we put her in a body bag and carried her out. And I went and told Mr. and Mrs. Patrick that we had their daughter. And Mr. Patrick asked if we would, not that moment, not that time, but the next day, if we'd be pallbearers or not. And I said we'd be honored to be. He wanted troopers to be her pallbearer because at that time we had quite the relationship between the family and the troopers. And they had seen all the harassment we were getting and the negative stuff we were getting from the press. So we buried Amy. We brought her in and we wore our tunics, which are a really fancy dress uniform. We only wear it for banquets and funerals and special occasions. And Mr. Patrick came up to me to shake my hand, and the shake went into a huge hug, and he's kind of a round kind of man, and he cried on my shoulder, and one of the press people got a picture of that, and it made the front page of the Anchorage Times, and I remember him whispering in my ear, "Thank you for your promise," and it was one of those things that, you thank the big guy upstairs for keeping you focused no matter how bad it was, because it was cold, it smelled. I was not allowed to come into my house when I got home until I can get those dirty clothes off me, and so it was, but we kept our word. That picture that hit the front page was priceless. You could not have bought that with any money than what we got out of that one picture. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't anything. It just happened. And by that time, I'm part of the family. I'm part of Patrick's family at that point, and so it was real. It was genuine, and there was nothing phony about that at all. It was real. I think that's what you get out of a picture like that.
What are some of the when you're interviewing someone who you know is guilty, probably you have a pretty good idea
He's guilty?
that they know he's guilty of something, but you agree. What are some of the techniques that you would have to use to get that information out?
Well, you try to build a rapport with this individual, no matter what he's done. Coming in there tougher than nails and all this, and hateful and spiteful, and will never get you a confession. But coming in there and building a rapport with him, and what you're trying to do is get him to trust you a little bit, to tell you things. And a lot of people want to tell you what they did, but they know that by doing so they may end up jeopardizing their situation. But they still want to tell you. It's getting into that point. There's lots of ways to do that. There's read and interview and interrogation classes you can take. There's all kinds of stuff, and I've taken that class and actually been successful with it. But establishing a rapport with somebody, no matter what they've done, really helps. If you can, they'll start talking to you, and sometimes they'll tell you more than you expected them to tell you, and which opens up a whole nother investigation. So I don't know how else to say it. Everybody's different, and you have to go there and realize that you can't use this technique this day and use it on another guy another day. You're going to have to get to know that person. That's what when I go and interview anybody, well, I don't do it anymore, but when I used to, I do a lot of studying on the person I was going to interview, so I know what kind of personality they has to be able to change my technique and how I was going to talk to this individual. Whether he believes in God or not, whether he believes if he hates females or not, if he keeps people on, all that stuff is necessary for me to be able to balance and direct the interview in the right direction.
They were talking to some interrogators from World War II, and they said for every hour you spend interrogating someone, you have to spend at least 2 preparing.
Yes. If I know I'm going to interview somebody tomorrow, I spend the day before, all day, going through his records, going through anything else he's done, and getting to know. By the time he comes in, I know this man or this woman, and I'm ready to interview him, and try to find those areas that may be weak or strong or whatever, and get into that part of his life. So I do the same thing. Every good investigator, anybody who does an interview does that. You don't just get a guy and start talking to him. Now that happens once in a while. You run into a suspect you didn't plan on, or he comes to you and starts talking about something that he's done that was wrong, and I mean that's happened to me, and you get caught off guard, so you do the best you can at the time.
Is this process ever actually exonerated? Have you thought someone was guilty when you went into this process and come out?
Yes, I have. I went in. That's happened several times, which always reminds me, always keep your mind open to things, because you never know. And good police investigation we're fact gatherers. We go and get the facts, and the facts always lead you to a good conclusion. And that conclusion could simply mean that this guy didn't do that. But if you suspect him doing it, you have to go at it believing that he did that, so you ask all the right questions. But you have to keep your mind open to realize as he's answering these questions, he may be ruling himself out as a suspect. They use the term today, people of interest instead of suspects. That's probably a good way to put that anymore, because that's what they are. And what you're trying to do is reduce these suspects down to get rid of the ones you don't need to talk to and get it down to the one you need to talk to. So yeah, many times, I've talked to somebody and they've basically exonerated themselves and showed to me they had nothing to do with the crime.
Explain to me the one time you discussed earlier with someone you had to remove yourself from the case.
It was a child pedophile case. It was a case where her father had been sexually abusing his daughter for some 2-3 years. And I spent hours interviewing this man, and I thought the interview was actually over with, and we're all ready to stand up and leave, and I was going to send him on his way. I got what I needed from him. He admitted that he'd been doing this, but as we were getting ready to leave, and we were still sitting down, and I was packing up my stuff. He says, and we're on a first name basis now, and he says, Tom, none of this was my fault. And I kind of looked at him and I said, really? What do you mean by that? I said, well, this was all my daughter's fault. Well, when he said that, I felt I felt angry that he was telling me this. How dare you blame your daughter for this? And he says, and I said, really, how come it's your daughter's fault? And he goes, well, I was sitting on my recliner and I had no shoes on, and she come up to me and rubbed her bottom up against my feet, and us men, we can't help ourselves. That's the way we're made. And that statement, besides the fact that he'd been hurting and abusing his daughter for those couple of years or so, angered me so much that I said, and by that time I'd done hundreds of these things, and that was it. I was done doing those kind of cases, and I finished that case up. We got a conviction for him, but I asked my boss that I need to be put back in homicide, property crime, anything, but I don't want to do those cases, and I haven't done one since.
Are there certain types of crimes that burn you out faster?
Well, I think that does. I think after a while you get tired of when you have, whether it be male or female, majority of the cases are females, but when you have this person looking at you with the most broken heart you could ever imagine, and feeling the pain that they're going through, wanting to erase it from their life if you could do that, seeing the tears and wiping the tears off their faces or crying, after a while, even though you're doing good work and even though you're putting the bad guy in jail and removing him from society so he doesn't hurt anybody else, it's hard to do those cases after a while. And there's probably other cases that maybe other officers would get tired of sooner, but I did that. I did a good job at it, but it was time for me to move on. So.